Hey guys, this is Dave, and I have the Dethonray, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, clarinet. And there are three variations of this device. You've got the light version, then the standard or regular clarinet, and then the pro version. This is the pro version, and it doesn't really indicate that on the box. I guess they used the same box for all of the devices. And I have to say, I'm having some mixed feelings about this device. Mostly very good, but mixed nonetheless. And I don't have a ton of experience with Dethonray products. I used to own the DTR One Plus app, and I did have mixed feelings about that device as well, because while it sounded incredible and it does have a really cool kind of retro design for its $1,000 asking price, it's pretty light on features and functionality. So now we have the Clarinet Pro, and I guess the question is, does its performance, its features, and just its general build quality, and I'm not just talking about externally, I'm also talking about the quality of the internal components and the engineering behind it as well. But the question is, does its performance, features, and its general build quality justify its $469 asking price? Well, that's the question I'm hoping to answer in today's video. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Okay, so as far as what you get in the box, of course, you do have the Clarinet Pro. They've also included some basic accessories as well. We've got a pretty high quality USB-C to C cable with angled connectors, which is nice. Plus, since there is a coaxial and optical input, they've also included both an optical and coaxial adapter, and then a very nice leather case. But just quickly going back to the statements that I made just now in my intro, for this price point, compared with other devices like the Xduo XD05 Basic 2, which I will have a review coming up of that shortly, the XD05 BAL, the Muse Hi-Fi M5 Ultra, just to name a few. Those cost less, but they do have similar features. Plus, they also add Bluetooth and a display, or even some dongles like the VTR17 or the M18i, which also has similar features, including a battery, but add Bluetooth and a display for a lower price. So I guess really the question I have to ask myself is, given its higher price point and the fact that it has less features, what else might it offer that could justify that additional cost? Well, before we do tackle that question, let's go ahead and talk about the basic features that it does have. We'll start with the outside. So on the front, we've got the volume knob, which is also an on-off switch. You then have a 4.4 balanced headphone output, and this is the only headphone output. It does not have a single-input output. The regular Clarinet does. This one does not. This 3.5 is just a coaxial / optical digital input. Then on the back of the device, there are two USB inputs. One is a data input, and then the other is a dedicated power input. And then right next to those is the gain switch. And that's it. So no display, no 3.5 headphone output. Oh, and there are also two indicator lights. The one on the front by the headphone output is the audio format indicator light. Of course, it changes colors based on the audio bitrate. And all I could find find on this was actually in the user instructions for the non-pro version of the clarinet that I actually had to download. And this should be accurate because these were the colors it indicated while playing these formats. For PCM, it was green, blue for DSD 64, purple for DSD 128, and then cyan for DSD 256. Then there is a power indicator light on the back, which changes colors based on the power level. Green for full, blue for when it is between, I think, 80 and 30%, and then red if it's below 30%. Now, something of note, the bit rate with the optical input is less than what you get out of the USB input. So the optical input can only decode up to 24-bit PCM, while the USB input can decode up to 32-bit. And then moving on to the internals, this is where things get just a little bit tricky because there isn't really much information available on the differences between the Pro version, the regular version, and the Lite version, other than to say that they've removed the 3.5 headphone output and have implemented a newly designed LPF circuit and amplifier to significantly enhance the power. Now, in regards to power output differences, it does say that this Pro version increases the RMS voltage output from 2 volts up to 3.3 volts. Otherwise, as far as I can tell, based on the available information, it uses the same AKM 4493S DAC chip as the regular clarinet, which is a really nice DAC chip. It has the same signal to noise ratio, which is 114 dBs. It also has the same 1600 milliamp battery capacity, which based on the website should give you about 7 hours of runtime. Although for me, it seemed like it was more like 6 hours. But to go back and address the question of, since it does not offer much in the way of features, are there any other things such as special internal audio architecture or higher end internal components that are being used that can help justify its higher price? Well, we know that it does use, we know it uses the AKM 4493S DAC chip, which is a nicer chip. However, again, it's the same chip that they used in the regular version of clarinet that costs only $220. But aside from that, all we know is that they eliminated the 3.5 single-ended out and have implemented some kind of, newly designed LPF circuit and amplifier, and supposedly it significantly enhances the power output. And we do know its power output is significantly higher, but it doesn't get much more specific than that. Now, I should clarify, I'm not trying to suggest that the extra cost isn't justified or that there aren't significantly upgraded internal components or some kind of upgraded architectural engineering going on inside. As a matter of fact, based on its sound quality and just the general sound performance, in my mind, there is definitely something very special happening on the inside of this thing, because otherwise I would just have to chalk it up to dumb luck or magic. But my point is that there isn't much information available. So another thing I should mention is that there are 3 different firmware options available for the Clarinet Pro: Rock, Serenade, and Rhapsody. There is a 4th firmware option for sensitive IEMs, but according to the website, that is only usable with the standard and light versions of the clarinet, and that does not work with the Pro version. Now, the other 3 that are compatible with the Pro version are designed to change the sound profile of the Clarinet Pro. Serenade is more of a balanced profile. Rhapsody is more suited for vocals and instruments. And then Rock, at least based on the description, says it increases transparency and is suited for rock. And it needs to be stated that I did not test these because honestly, while I can appreciate the added versatility that those bring to the Clarinet Pro, and I'm sure there will be those of you that would find that useful, but I usually just try and focus on testing devices with their stock firmware and in their stock form. And besides, I really liked the stock presentation of the Clarinet Pro. And then one last thing is that I did experience some inconsistency with its operation as far as it detecting source devices. And it wasn't just with certain devices, it happened with several devices. And what I mean by that is that I would plug it in, turn it on, increase the volume, begin playing the music on my source device, and I would not hear anything. But then if I unplugged the device, turned it off, and then repeated the process, it would start to work. It wasn't every time, but it was maybe 1 out of 6 or 7 times that I tried to connect it. And that's not really a major issue for me, but it is something to be aware of. One other thing is that if you are listening to music and then you turn the device all the way down, when you go to turn the music back up, there is no sound. And then I would have to turn the device off and then back on. And sometimes I would even have to unplug it and then plug it back in order to get the audio signal. So it's as if turning the device all the way down somehow either it mutes the device, or it just, for some reason, there's something happening internally so that it disrupts the audio signal until you, again, reset it. Anyway, just a few things to be aware of. I guess it is possible that some of these issues could be addressed and resolved in future firmware updates. Okay, I think that covers all of the non-sound related stuff, so let's go ahead and move on to sound. Okay, so as far as some of the sources that I used the Ibasso DX340, the DX260 MK2, the Hibi R6 Pro Max, Onyx Alpha XI1. I also went directly from my PC and my S25 Ultra, and even some budget sources like the FIO M21. I tested it using both digital inputs, so the optical input and the coaxial input as well, using the provided adapters. Now let's go ahead and quickly talk about IEM pairings, the volume control, and background noise. So obviously this has way more than enough power to drive any IEM that you can throw at it. And as far as its volume control and it having good volume range with IEMs, it was okay. And I found that with IEMs that weren't super sensitive, I wouldn't really start to reach uncomfortable volume levels until around, I think it was around 1 o'clock. So I felt like I had enough flexibility to dial my preferred listening volume level in pretty well, again, with most of my IEMs. But it was different with sensitive IEMs like my Andromedas, and this is in low gain, of course. But with sensitive IEMs, I was reaching pretty loud volume levels around 11 o'clock. And that may have been okay if the volume started at like 6 o'clock, but it doesn't. It's more like the 8 o'clock position, and really maybe even the 9 o'clock position by the time you hear sound after you turn it on. So really, you only have a little bit of volume control between about the 8 o'clock position and the 11 o'clock position, and that's actually being generous. So that said, it's kind of interesting that they don't have that high sensitivity firmware available for the Pro version. And again, this is only with really sensitive IEMs. Otherwise, you should be fine with almost any other IEMs. Now, speaking of sensitive IEMs, I did actually pick up on just the slightest amount of background noise, but again, only with really sensitive IEMs. I did not hear it with 85 to 90% of my other IEMs. And even with sensitive IEMs, it wasn't really that noticeable even when I was listening to quieter tracks or even quieter parts of songs. So it wasn't really a significant problem for me. But if you're looking for an ultra black background while using highly sensitive IEMs, then this may not work for you. Maybe with the standard or light version with the high sensitivity firmware, maybe that will give you an ultra black background. But this version, while it is really, really quiet with almost every IEM that I've tried it with, it did give me just a little bit of background noise. Again, only with my most sensitive IEMs and only in between tracks. My guess is most of you won't even notice it. But okay, so that is how this performed with IEMs. But what about headphones? Well, again, the Pro version ups the power output or the voltage output to 3.3 volts RMS from 2 volts. And I also need to clarify, I do not have, nor have I heard either the standard or light version of the clarinet. So I cannot say whether or not that there is a significant difference between those and this Pro version. But what I can tell you is that when I compared this with some of my other portable devices within this price range, it seemed to handle basically all of my full-size sets very, very well. Even with my 300 ohm HD 800S, it was able to reach impressively loud volume levels with a little headroom to spare. So as long as you don't have anything that is unusually hard to drive, my guess is if you are looking for a portable device for your full-size sets, you're going to be just fine with this. And my guess is there are going to be very few sets out there that this will not be able to drive sufficiently. So how does it sound? Well, its general presentation, again, this is with the stock firmware out of the box. So my hope would be that, since I'm assuming the purpose of the other firmwares would be to introduce maybe some coloration to its presentation based on their description, but my hope would be obviously that the stock firmware would have little to no coloration at all, and that it would be the most linear in its presentation. So is that the case? Well, thankfully, yes. To my ears, this is what I would describe as landing well within the range of linear. So there is basically no notable coloration in its presentation that I can hear. So it doesn't lean bright or clinical, nor does it lean overly warm. It still has very good treble detail, but at the same time, I didn't hear anything at all that sounded overly sharpened, and certainly not harsh or glaring. Extension in both directions is also excellent, and it extends all the way into the lowest sub bass frequencies, providing all of the sub bass rumble you could ever want. And then going the opposite direction, it also has very, very good treble extension, so it delivers plenty of air and plenty of micro details if they are present in the recording. So from one end of the frequency spectrum to the other, you just have a very reasonably linear overall presentation that delivers a complete and fairly accurate picture of the sound landscape. And another characteristic that I listen for in a device is instrument and vocal naturalness. So does a metal instrument sound like metal? Does wood sound like wood? Do voices sound real or natural? And I would say absolutely yes to all of those. Everything just sounded as it should. And I guess when I think of a transparent device, I don't think this is going to give you the same kind of transparency and purity you might get from a higher end portable device like the DX340, or a desktop device like the Luxon X9 or the FIO K19. Of course, those are way more expensive than this. However, this does remind me of the iBasso DC Elite and even my M18i here, but with more power. And it is a little larger, but it is still portable, or at least transportable for sure. Now, just to remind you, as far as portable devices go that I've come across, the DC Elite is probably one of the best portable devices I've ever heard under $500. And I would probably put the M18i right there too, probably about on par with the DC Elite. And now the Clarinet Pro. But again, the Clarinet Pro brings even more power to the table. And just for more context, again, comparing the Clarinet Pro with other portable devices, with this step up in cost compared with less expensive devices like the Muse Hi-Fi M5 Ultra, the X Duo XD05 Basic 2, the Ibasso Nunchaku, the FIO QX13, the BTR17, and I could go on and on. But suffice it to say, the Clarinet Pro, like the DC Elite or M18i, is now being added to the list of one of the best devices that I've heard under $500. And then when you consider the increased power output, for those of you who might like a little more power for your full-size sets, this brings that to the table as well. And again, even though there isn't a ton of information on the internals of this device, whatever is going on inside of this device, it was obviously very carefully thought through. And it was, whatever they did was very well implemented. And look, again, there are less expensive devices out there, even here on my table, that actually offer more in the way of features, and they sound great too. However, I think I'm kind of starting to see Dethonray the same way I see companies like Ibasso, as one of those companies that is more focused on creating a device that is less about features and more about sound quality, and whose primary goal is really to focus all of their energy on keeping some of the non-essential stuff to a minimum and focusing on maximizing its sound quality. So focus everything on the internal components and make sure the engineering is good enough and sound enough to back those components up. Because if you're going to charge this much money for a small portable device, I think most hobbyists, especially hobbyists who may have nicer IEMs or higher end headphones, my guess is that they would simply want it to sound as good as possible. And look, from an audio quality perspective, I think Dethonray accomplished that. Does it have some operational bugs that need to be worked out? Sure. And there may be those of you who are looking to purchase a device in this $400 to $500 price range that would just prefer to pass this up for a more stable device. And that is reasonable. But if you are like me and you do maybe find some of those inconsistencies a little annoying, but are more concerned about making sure that you're getting your money's worth in terms of sound quality, then this might be a good option for you. Okay, I think that does it for this video. If you are new to the Gizaudio channel and you like our videos, please take a minute and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to go a step further, you can also support us through our Patreon. I'll be sure and leave a link in the description. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this review. Please like this video, please share this video. I hope you have an awesome day.